Hello.
Hey, good evening. Oh, good morning.
Hello.
How you doing, Ping?
Good, how are you?
Yeah, very well, thanks. Can I introduce the illustration gang here at Leeds College of Art? Can you see
Oh,
everyone?
hi.
Hello.
Oh, hi.
It's nice to meet you. We're all quite excited. There's like 2 days left to go before they finish their first year, so we have.
Thanks for sticking around for me.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Well, this is like the highlight of the year. This is, like the final celebration. Can you introduce yourself, please?
Yeah, I'm Ping Zhu, and I'm an illustrator, and I'm living and working in Brooklyn, in my studio right now in Greenpoint, and yeah.
Okay, cool. That's great. Let's say, can you show us anything? Got any artifacts or treasures we could have a look at?
Yes, within my immediate grasp, I have this tiny wooden tapir, which is an amazing gift from a client that I worked with who was living in Japan.
Yeah, lovely. What's he made out of?
It's like a really light wood,
Right.
so it's actually a lot lighter than it looks.
Okay.
But it's a treasure.
Absolutely.
And also, I'm trying to grow a lavender plant, but it's not working. It's in an egg. It just looks like a broken egg on my desk right now.
Well, good luck with that. Do you find it's good to have like plant life and stuff around you? Do you like having natural artifacts?
Yeah, except I think we're all very terrible at keeping plants alive. So it's like maybe alive for a week or two, and then they just turn brown.
I went and got some Marimo balls after I saw you put yours online. How's your Marimo ball going? Yeah! Good times. How
Does
long?
everyone know what that is? It's like a algae moss ball.
Has he got a name?
It's called Moog, M-O-O-G.
Nice.
That's adorable.
Yeah, good time. And have you had it for a while? Is it doing all right?
Yeah, it was like my present to myself when I came to the studio, and it was my customary moss ball because I've killed all the rest of them along the way. So this one's still doing okay.
Okay, best of luck with it.
Thank you.
So your studio space is not your home space, is that correct?
Yes,
Okay.
it's a shared space.
Okay, and can you tell us a little bit about how it works, how you occupy it, and what's going on there?
Well, I share it with 5 or 6 other people who are also illustrators and designers, and we just have our tables and kind of our workspace, and not everyone comes in every day, but we can kind of mingle and work on our own things and hang out when we take breaks. But the building used to be an old pencil factory, and it's right by the water along the East River, so if you're on the roof you can see Manhattan. But it's been converted into all these different studio spaces now, so we're on the top floor, so we get like a nice natural light from the roof.
You lucky buggies.
Nice.
Yeah, really nice.
But I can swivel my laptop around if
Yeah, come
you
on,
want
let's
to.
have a look. Show us what you
Okay.
got.
Well, 2 of my studio mates are here, so don't mind them.
We'll all look the other way.
Okay, so I will just do a slow pan around. So I sit right next to the front door, but
Good for fires.
I'll just go, yeah, exactly. We'll go on the top floor. So this first area is where Jessica Hitch and Ben Berry work when they're here.
Cool.
And then those are my 2 studio mates, if you can see them.
Hello!
And then we have a foosball table, and the rest of the studio there's like a communal desk area.
Nice.
And the skylight and the plants that are currently dying, and the small bar area, and then next to me are 2 other studio mates that aren't in yet, but they are Liz and Gavin of Script and Seal. So, and then this is my space.
Amazing.
Cool. And also, we have, I don't know if you can see it, but Dan rearranged Jessica's drop caps to spell big farts. So, this is, it's a nice detail. You notice it or you don't.
Absolutely. Good protocol. How important is your studio space to you? Is it really essential to have, do you think, as a practitioner?
For me it is, because I tried working from home when I was living in London, but I realized that I was really lonely and needed some kind of, perspective as to where I was in my work and my sanity.
Yeah.
So for me it works out really well because everyone's really good at managing themselves, and it's nice to just be able to know that people are working around you instead of feeling like, you have your own space, but you're sharing it. So
Yeah. Yeah.
Definitely works better for me. But some people do really well at home by themselves, or some people can't live without other people. So it's just nice to have kind of done both to figure out this is where I'm happiest.
Yeah. Could I ask you, if it's not too intrusive a question, like what's your working day? I mean, how do you use your hours for an average working day?
Recently, I've been trying to wake up at a normal time, so I've been setting my alarm for 8 and kind of waking up and getting ready, and then not spending too much time like at home and just kind of getting myself to the studio as soon as possible because I don't have internet at home, so I can't really do much.
That's
and
great.
It's kind of a way for me to chase myself out of the house too, so I don't spend time there just figuring out what to wear. And then I come to the studio and I kind of answer emails in the morning and then kind of get everything I need to do done, especially if I have clients from the UK. They're a few hours ahead, so I kind of attend to them first, if that's the case. And then around lunchtime, I'm kind of starting to drop big hints around to my studio mates and be like, so is anyone hungry? Does anyone want a big sandwich right now? Because I really like sandwich right now. So then that happens, and then I kind of enjoy being able to eat lunch not bothered. Like I don't want to try and work while I'm eating, so it's kind of a break for me, and then I'll just kind of work throughout the rest of the day, and if it's a busy day, then I'll stay later, but I still kind of take breaks between like 3 or 4 hours just to make sure that I can keep it together. Otherwise, it just feels like I'm sitting here going crazy and not actually being productive and just like staring at my screen. But usually try and go home before the sun is down, but it depends tremendously. But I come in pretty much every day.
Okay, amazing.
Yeah.
You mentioned living in London or living in the UK briefly before. Could I ask you to, in a fairly succinct way, talk us through like you leaving school and you being a professional illustrator now, the steps that you've taken?
It was in 2010 when I graduated in April, and a few months after that I had the chance to live in London. So I moved in September, and I had lived in LA my whole life. So first of all, your weather is extremely cruel, and that was something I didn't realize. And I spent the first year trying to figure out how to keep just what it meant to be a freelance illustrator. So I wasn't really busy, I didn't have a lot of work, but it was a lot of time for me to kind of practice drawing and to figure it out and to know what it's like to be kind of lonely and miserable. And I think in a way that sounds a little bit morbid, but it helped in a way to just gain perspective on where I wanted to be and where I didn't want to be. So I didn't know anyone really in London, and I actually used Twitter a lot to get to know some illustrators that I admired and just kind of sent them little tweets and was like, hey, I really like this stuff. And actually, I think you talked to Lizzie and Eleni, who were actually my flatmates later on when I was living in London. And that was mainly because of Twitter. But I think the first year was like loneliness and sadness, and then the second year was a little less of that and just trying to get a grasp on things. But a little bit busier than the first year. And then the final year that I was there was kind of like I felt I had steadier footing and I knew a few more people, and I was at Open Studios in Dalston in London, and that also helped like kind of let me feel what it's like to work around other people. And that's kind of why I decided to move back and join a studio space when I came to New York, was to also keep that feeling going. Amazing. So I guess that's my 3 years there. Okay.
So would you encourage? I mean, that's such a bold move straight after a degree to finish your degree and say, right, I'm moving to a foreign country on my own to live in a big city. But it seems to have paid off for you. Would you recommend it to other people who are graduating as illustrators?
I was just gonna say it's probably not for everybody, because I don't know how people feel comfortable with their work. Like some people need a really nice, safe environment to be able to produce their best work. But for me, I kind of need to be challenged or like see what I can have or what I can lose. And in that case, moving to London was like everything was completely different. I didn't know anyone around me, so I really had to kind of keep treading water. Otherwise, I felt like I wouldn't make it in a way. And also in my time during school, I felt very comfortable. Like I was familiar with my surroundings and my friends, and it was safe. Yeah. But it wasn't very challenging for me, and I needed something a little bit more stimulating. Yeah. And I mean, it was kind of a severe decision, but I feel like I gained enough from it where, you know, moving to another huge city actually didn't faze me so much. And I'm kind of glad I did that, even though the plunge was like, you know, super cold and shocking at first. Yeah. But I survived, so you can do it too, I'm sure.
Did you drink some like nutty pints of beer?
Yeah, I mean, I definitely raised my tolerance.
Okay, good. That's London living. So did it in turn like affect your work? Did it affect your illustration work?
I think in the way that it was like self-discipline or learning how to manage yourself in your own time, because there wasn't someone hovering over you kind of telling you what to do, and assignments just, if no one was asking you for work, then you had to keep yourself going in a way. So in that way, I think I developed more confidence in my own work to be able to say like, okay, I don't need someone to tell me what to do to be able to do something. But at the same time, it was also a lot of like having to look at yourself in the mirror and be like, okay, you're not insane. This is just what you have to do, and it's not supposed to be easy. But I guess, yeah. So eventually, it felt like it made more sense in the end, like looking back on it. But at the time, it still feels kind of confusing and strange that I wasn't doing it intentionally for making my illustration work better. I think I was trying to make myself as a human better and learn more about life, and hopefully in turn that seeped into my work and became something else.
That's really interesting to hear, and we've just spent today like reflecting on the experience of just the first year and the intensity of the year, and talking about the progression and evolution of work, but also of being a student and moving out and learning, and I think the two things totally coexist, so it's really interesting to hear you speak in similar way about that sort of thing. I was wondering, can we have a look at some of your artwork?
Did you want to see some physical pieces first, and then we can do the screen share?
Yeah, totally. Let's look at what you've got physical. I was wondering, could you try and describe to us what Ping Zhu does as an illustrator?
Well, I paint with gouache on paper, and I know a lot of people work digitally these days, so I kind of enjoy maintaining the fact that I work with my hands for most of my process, and my pieces aren't super big because I still need to be able to scan them and, you know, make edits, and usually things that are smaller can, you know, be painted faster. So I have like all my sketchbooks and all my paintings that I've accumulated here, and I guess the subject matter that I paint is really like portraits or animals and various things that relate to any metaphors with my editorial assignments.
Okay, cool.
Yeah.
And do you think there's like a consistent aesthetic or tone to your work? Would you say it's, I don't know, I don't want to put words in your mouth, but what are you trying to achieve with your kind of style? I hate to use the word.
I think it's because it's a visual medium that it's easy to feel like you're being replaced by photos or something that could be done in an easier or faster way. So I like to kind of maintain the quality of like what it means to do something with your hands, and like what can't be captured in a photo or what can't you see with the naked eye. An illustration is supposed to kind of give you these special glasses to be able to see the world differently or as someone else and in an interpreted way, more so than literally. So I think that's kind of what I'm trying to hang on to, but also I think my style is also very gestural with the way that I use my brushes, so hopefully that kind of puts some life into the illustration and looks like it maybe could exist in a real world or in its own dimension, but you know, it's my little universe.
Okay, amazing. Cool. That made a lot of sense.
But I can just show you like what I'm surrounded with in my workspace as far as when I start an assignment or like the beginnings and endings of things. But I use these kinds of sketchbooks that I buy from Muji that are kind of moleskin sized, and I fill these up pretty quickly because instead of kind of using an eraser all the time, I just kind of tear the page out or just flip it and draw something else on the other side. So these are all filled with like notes or like different drawings and sketches. And sometimes I scan them or sometimes I just leave it in. But I've accumulated about this much since I've been here.
Nice.
So yeah, so those are a few the sketches in the small format. There's like bigger sketchbooks and such. But also I have large portfolio books that with the plastic sleeves that I keep all my paintings in. Okay. Because I realized that because there's pipes above us, because we're on the roof for heating. So water sometimes drips down on them, and gouache cannot be mixed with water after, because then it will completely destroy itself.
Yeah.
So I bought that pretty much to protect my work. But then I have like the original paintings that I've scanned in after assignments have been done, but just to kind of give a scale, like they're, you know, moderately like the same size as within range of working. So
Amazing.
I don't think you can see these perfectly, but I have
getting a sense. It's really nice to see the scale. Can I ask what kind of paper you work on?
This is BFK Reeves, which is a printmaking paper that is made in France. And it comes in like white and cream and different colors, but I use like a white, I think 280 in weight.
Yeah.
So it has a bit of tooth, and it's also kind of heavy, so it feels tactile, and especially with gouache, since it dries matte, it helps to make it look like it's a printed material, and it's not like as textured as oil painting and stuff. So I enjoy the flatness of it, and it's not very shiny.
Absolutely, lovely.
Yeah, so then there's some bigger pieces that I do that even if the assignments weren't as big in print, like I like to work a bit bigger and then shrink it down afterwards, so I can draw like more details and make sure that the edges are clean.
Yeah.
Because I don't usually use any kind of masking or tape, it's really just handling the brush for all the details. And it's easier to keep those clean and a bit larger. So I usually don't work much bigger than this, which is kind of like the biggest so far. And this was kind of to scale anyway, so it's just kind of the range of how I work.
But if it was an editorial job and you were given sort of dimensions that are quite unique to sort of newspaper layout, you just do a scaled up version that's a ratio of those dimensions?
Yeah, I have a handy app on my phone that's a proportion app, so I just put in the dimensions and I kind of blow it up a bit. Instead of using one of those wheels that we used to use in college that was like, you know, you had to swivel the numbers and try and figure out what it was. And I was like, I can't do math that well. So that's just use technology.
Amazing. I wonder whether we could have a look at some stuff on screen and ask you to talk us through in a bit more detail your process from like receiving a brief to delivering artwork.
Yeah, definitely. So let's do this. Oh, I know how to do this.
Yeah, can you remember? Okay. Yeah, was it Conversations, I think?
Conversations and share screen. Okay.
Super.
Yay! Cool. Okay, I will minimize this so you don't have to look at your own face. Or you can look at it a little bit.
I'll just ignore it. That's great.
Okay. I have a few projects here. I guess I can start with this one, which is a book that I made with a small publishing company in San Francisco called Youth in Decline. And actually this is more of an experimentation with process and kind of a mixture between sketches and finished work to try and feel like what it is to draw what you're feeling and thinking. So it's not really a narrative, it's more like random bits of paper that have been lying around, or like sketches that I kind of did without thinking and just kind of threw them in a corner and kind of putting them all together to kind of see if I could make this weird Frankenstein art book.
Yeah.
So the series is actually called Frontier, and they ask artists to make, they have their own storyline, like usually it could be a comic or more narrative, but this one was definitely more of like what my soul looks like, I think.
Okay, nice. It's a great concept.
So just let me know if it's lagging in any way, but these are just some of the spreads that were inside. So this is like a mixture between colored pencils and regular pencils and just kind of drawing whatever I'm feeling or thinking. Obviously not too close to reality, but also trying to see if you can come up with something on accident instead of planned, which I feel like with commercial work, it's so easy to kind of follow the assignment and follow the rules that you forget what it's like to kind of let loose and just do something without thinking. And this actually proved to be really hard for me in the beginning, so I just had to kind of make a lot of random drawings and put them together, so I had to do more than what you see here.
Yeah, that's really interesting, Pink, because it strikes me that there's such a level of craft and skill and execution, that like trying to balance that with accident and mistake and discovery, which I still see as a big part of your practice, but trying to find that balance between the two is not something that comes easy, I guess. I mean,
yeah, I just think it's strange because we're trying to be in control of our mediums all the time and to have strong concepts, and to kind of see something in your mind and be able to put it on paper is something that takes a lot of practice.
Yeah.
But once you are so used to that routine, being able to kind of stop and reverse that and kind of go back to childish scribbles in a way is actually a lot harder than it seems.
Yeah.
Because you're so used to being like, oh, that's not good, it's not as well as I want it to be drawn, or what am I doing? I need like a idea or a brief to be able to move forward. And I don't want to feel like I need to rely on assignments to be able to make work. Like
absolutely,
yeah. So this was definitely like a great release for just trying to figure out who I am at this point. And this was pretty recent, so I think...
nice pelican.
Thanks.
You're not into sports?
I'm not as much as most people.
Yeah, that's great.
I mean, I enjoy it, but I mean, I went to go watch a basketball game at a sports bar yesterday, which was out of my comfort zone. But I went because of friends and also because they were selling chicken wings for 50 cents.
Okay, that's fair enough.
Yeah, so all this, like, the drawings don't exist in the same sketchbook. These have just been compiled together in the end based on I mean, none of the things were for work, which is kind of the best part of it.
Yeah.
But also, like, all the little brush strokes are these little pieces of paper that I have next to me that I use to test my paints when I'm doing a painting. But it kind of turns into its own thing afterwards, which is nice.
And the process of going back through old sketchbook work and trying to assign new values, do you find that like a pleasurable, interesting process, or something that's quite difficult to make decisions about?
Yeah, I really like going back to see where I was a few months ago or a few years ago. I think it's really hard to measure success or progress without reference. And I'm not a fan of people burning all their work or throwing things away because it's really nothing to be ashamed of in the moment. And I think you won't really know how far you've come unless you have a shitty drawing from 2 months ago that you did and you're super embarrassed by it, because then you can compare it to the nice drawing that you made 2 months later that's in front of you right now that you made yourself. And it's kind of just keeping a history of who you are as a person and where you were in your life. And I think all these things are important, not necessarily that you have to surround yourself with these things, but if you ever wanted to go back and read or look at something that you made, I mean, we can't remember everything, so it's definitely worth keeping around, even if you hate it. Absolutely. Especially if you hate it, actually.
Yeah, couldn't agree more. There's the two different frames of mind, isn't it? It's the unconscious drawing, and then it's the kind of reflective review of those drawings. And I think that's what really comes through when looking at this selection,
Yeah, because while you're in school, I think it's so much about honing your craft and being able to be good at drawing and explaining your ideas, but you kind of forget what it means to be a person and to have other interests and, go outside once in a while to figure out that there's a counterbalance in your life. And if you don't have exposure to the world, then your ideas won't be able to be better than they are because you're looking internally. So I think it's nice to kind of take a break from the illustration world sometimes and just like go outside and see something new or expose yourself to something that you don't have any idea about, because then it can give you more ideas about what you know and things like that.
Yeah, absolutely. That's wonderful to hear.
So I will close this one and move on to more, I guess, controlled illustrations.
Okay.
So this was a piece that I did for the New York Times book review, and it's actually not out yet, but I'll give you guys a sneak peek. And I've worked with the New York Times for a few years now, but it's kind of a nice relationship because there's several different art directors there, and they have different sections of the paper. So this one, they give you a brief on a book that's being reviewed, and there's really no like text, like art director notes. You just kind of read it and take what you want from it. So sometimes it's really literal, or sometimes it's more like about a feeling. And this one was a book called Wonderland, about a lady who had a music career and decided to go on a break, but wanted to come back. But by doing so, she had to sell a piece of her father's artwork to be able to fund her album. So it's kind of like her wildlife, and they described a lot like the way she looked with this like crazy head of red hair, and she was really leggy and energetic. So I just wanted to try and combine those elements into the illustration without giving everything away about the book. So these were the roughs that I sent, and there's something about like performing and the lighting on a stage that I find really interesting. So this was kind of like part researched, part invented in my mind about like what it could feel like to be on a stage and what I remember from going to concerts myself. So it's just various versions of her kind of singing and interacting with a microphone, but being very much alone. And eventually we went with this one for the final, which was the first sketch.
So all three sketches went to the art director?
Sorry?
All three sketches go to the art director?
Yeah.
And then you feel like you're able to have like a quite an open conversation with them about it, or do they just, you have to just wait until they come back on them?
Yeah, I send them and I say like, oh, this is the kind of what I'm thinking, and I'll write a little bit about each of them. And then lately I've been saying like, oh, well, personally I like, you know, number one the most, so I'd be happiest to go forward with that just to give them a little bit of your input. And also you don't want to set yourself up for total disappointment when they pick the sketch you like the least.
Yeah.
So on that note, I also never send sketches that I wouldn't be happy drawing, because it just seems to be a thing with everyone where they always pick the one that you hate the most.
Yeah.
So I just try and not have that situation come up at all. But also it's nice to kind of have a dialogue and to just say like, oh, what do you think? Or like, do you think we should focus more on this part of the illustration? Or like, what do you want me to bring out more of? Sometimes with those questions, it's nice to let them give you a bit of feedback, but sometimes they give it without asking as well.
Yeah, sure.
And also like with editorial assignments, because the turnaround is so quick, you don't really have time to discuss things completely in detail. It's just like, let's go with this, it looks good, I like the feeling, let's keep this in mind, you know, take it away kind of thing.
Yeah.
So with this one, it was to keep like the energy and this kind of tangling of hair and microphone cord together, so it's kind of like she's one entity. And then like the background was just kind of secondary and to help enhance the craziness of who she is. So hopefully that was done well.
Yeah, Ping, it's amazing. It's great.
Yeah, and that's the thing too, like usually when we send away a final, our directors don't always write back. Sometimes they'll just be like, okay, I got it, thanks. Or sometimes, you know, they'll say, oh, that's really great, like, we really love it. And sometimes they'll say nothing at all, which makes you just sweat until it's been printed. You're like, has it been killed? Did they hate it? Are they ever going to call me again? So that's just, that's all the thoughts that I have to suffer with afterwards.
And can I ask, that's all one painting, and then, you know, just scan that painting and send it off?
Mm-hmm. Okay. So this is all done analog, and I just clean up things if my scanner's dirty and there's like a hair, then I have to remove that. But
yeah, sure. And
don't want it to be too organic.
between that piece of work that you submitted, when you're in the process of painting from your roughs, do you like work on 2 or 3 paintings at once and like let them evolve, or do you just work on one and totally commit to it?
I have a few jobs going on at the same time, but when it comes to actually painting them, like I go from beginning to end with one because it dries so quickly, and I might as well just finish it while it's in front of me.
Yeah.
So that's the way I've always worked. But with sketches, I've kind of done some sketches and put them aside and then like work on something else and kind of see if they all relate to each other in some way. Like maybe I'll have a good drawing day and the energy feels the same in all the sketches.
Yeah.
And then some days I just feel completely down and I need to kind of focus on one other thing if something's just a dead end for the moment.
Yeah. But can I ask you a question, Ping? You know, if you're like making this painting we're looking at now, and it's wonderful, and there's so many aspects of it I think are really, really like assured and really well executed. But what happens if you're like 10 hours into it and you think, I'm not happy with that brushstroke?
I just have to start it over. Sometimes I've gone halfway through a painting and realized that I just really didn't like the color choice that I've done. And then I'll just stop at that point because I don't feel like you can rescue a piece at a certain point, especially with gouache. And also when I send sketches, I like to send them in color if I have time for it, because then I don't have to try and figure out the colors as I'm painting the final, and it gives the art director reassurance that they kind of can see where the finish will be.
Yeah.
So it kind of works out more, but you really do have to have the time to figure it out. But also, I think I've spilled things on my paintings, which, you know, then I can't send that either.
It's such an intense, sort of hardcore process. But it's so admirable, and you can totally see how much you've learned from working in this way. I mean, well, I presume. I mean, do you feel like you've given yourself like a pretty intense kind of learning curve from employing this way of working?
I think to me, painting by hand is actually a lot easier than working in the computer, because I can't really emulate the things that I want in the computer in the same way. So I think there's a steeper learning curve in using Photoshop than there is for like painting by hand, but I think it's also that I paint so often that maybe the curve just seems like spread out a bit wider, and it doesn't seem as daunting. And but I don't know, like you don't really notice the growth while it's happening until like afterwards when you look back on your work. It's like, oh, that wasn't done as well as it is like nowadays, or I'm glad I have more control over my brushes and my strokes and my color sense. But that just comes with practice or like more exposure to things. Yeah,
absolutely.
Yeah, so I will close this one now. And just show you another one that was for the New York Times that I did, I think, a month or two ago, which was about how there's no real cure for when you get bitten by snakes. The venom just kind of can kill you. It's really trying to shorten the time between getting bitten and getting to the hospital to get some kind of a cure, and that it's been killing a lot of people in different countries because there is no actual anti-venom. So I just kind of thought that this person kind of coiled underneath a snake that's kind of, you can't really read it right away, but like the snake has power over the person, and you don't really know if the person's alive or dead. Like, I like some kind of ambiguity in the work because I don't like giving everything away all at once. That kind of loses the interest as far as, what it means to actually be able to look at an illustration for more than 10 seconds. So this was the final piece, which was actually a color piece that, like the last one, it ran in color for the New York Times, but usually they're in black and white.
Wow, that's amazing. I'm interested in maybe this is just part of your, like a visual device that you've developed yourself, but like the lighting seems kind of equally kind of effective and believable, but also becomes like a very kind of stylistic device. Is this something you've had to like study a lot of life drawing or observed studies to get your head around how to manage lighting in your images?
Yeah, I think being able to draw as a basic skill is a necessity as far as being able to make something stylized. Because if you want to draw a person, for example, and you don't understand anatomy completely, it's very hard to kind of like find an alternative way of drawing a person that's convincing and that shows that you have some knowledge. But when I was in school, there was a lot of, at least the first year was very much focused on technical skills like painting and drawing. So there wasn't as much room for being able to figure out your style or your voice. It was just a matter of like, here's a paintbrush and here's a palette of oil paints and here's this model sitting in front of you and this is what we're going to do for the next 2 semesters. So it wasn't a lot of fun, it was just a lot of like sharpening of skills and ability, but it's definitely helped in the long run for me being able to paint and, use these materials and just understanding like how color and value and shape and just like the elements of design work for my process now. And also like I can't work completely without reference photos because as much as I would like to know that I can draw a snake off the top of my head, I can't. But I definitely employ photo booth often for like taking dumb photos of myself. Like actually the photo of the person laying down was, I just put my arm over my face to take a photo of that, but it was, it wasn't like I was naked or like had a snake coiled around me. It was just kind of see where my arm would rest on my face if I had been in that position. So it doesn't have to be over the top, but I also just kind of use Google for images, which I can kind of show you my reference folder. which is just it's not necessarily trying to copy a photo because I don't feel like that does illustration any justice, but it's to kind of get the essence of that angle or that pose or what that lighting could be like. So I think this first image that I pulled up was the main reference for the painting.
Yeah.
But I think you wouldn't be able to necessarily say that it's an exact copy because of the color or the, just how it's removed from the actual photo.
Yeah, absolutely.
But also it helps to have several different angles of different types of snakes to be able to understand how they work, because snake anatomy isn't something that everyone studies. And also I think just to understand, like if you're having an assignment that's about a certain type of breed in a certain location, like you wouldn't want to misuse the type of snake. Like if it's a snake from America versus one from India, like they would be totally different. So it's also nice to keep those kinds of details in mind, just in case someone who's reading the paper is like, hey, that snake doesn't even exist in that country, and I know that. So
yeah,
don't want to be called out for basic error.
Yeah, lazy snake identification.
Yeah, exactly. So I don't know any of the names of these breeds, but I know that they're from different places.
Nice.
And I don't know which ones are poisonous, except maybe this one, because it says so. Yeah, so that's like basic reference photos that I keep. But once I save the photos on my computer, they're just kind of always there. I don't delete them after an assignment just because I don't know if I'll ever need them in the future.
Okay.
And it's also just nice to kind of see like, oh yeah, I remember like this photo that I saved for this assignment.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Have there any more projects that you'd like to show us through, perhaps?
Yeah, I have, I think, 4 more different ones if you guys still want to see things.
Yeah, well, could you show us one more? Perhaps something where there's, is there anything that you found particularly difficult, or something where you feel you've like really pushed on with a technique or method, perhaps? Well,
I can show you the one that I held up earlier, like the large piece as far as scale goes.
Yes, please.
Because I think, this was the sketch for it, because just when you're working with something bigger, the composition has more dynamics and you can, there's more room for error in a way. And so this one was an article about like why people should open their windows and the benefits of fresh air. So it was this woman like looking outside her window, but in order to like have different ideas and not just have this lady sticking her head out the window, it's like different environments. So maybe she was taking a bath and it's also kind of like this relaxing moment, just kind of painting a different scenario, or also borrowing people from my studio to show like, oh yeah, even in a studio setting, it's kind of nice to inject like my own actual reality to use in my assignments. So it was just a matter of like figuring out the composition and how much I can invent or how much I need reference. So those kinds of things I figure out a bit more with the bigger pieces. And in the end, it becomes trying to keep the graphic shapes and shadows and how much is real and how much is invented and stuff.
It seems much simpler than the initial rough. Did you feel like you wanted? Well, you mentioned the graphic shapes before, but what informed you in deciding to remove all the plants and the ephemera you had in the early scamp?
Yeah, this one was in part due to the art director wanted it to be really simple because I think there was going to be text covering certain areas.
Okay.
So that's the reason why all the foliage disappeared. But I think it would have worked out either way as an illustration if any of the sketches had been taken to final the way they looked. But there's also some kind of nice quality of, just like focusing on maybe what the important part is. Like you look at the details of her face more so than the rest of the room to kind of understand where the article is pointing you at. But it feels, it's like taking a leap of faith when you leave the sketch and start on the final, because you can't preserve everything there is in a sketch. And I've heard the same with people who paint murals or anything larger. You just have to kind of let go of your initial idea and kind of trust that this is a new realm that you're entering with your work. So trust your instincts with that and know that you've done it on a small scale, but you can like take it to the next level in a way.
Yeah, absolutely.
So
it's amazing. It's interesting you're talking about composition. We've been studying or certainly having conversations about line of sight and how you can maybe control the most important information, but do you actively plan compositions and think about how you want an image to function, or does it happen more intuitively when you're doing your thumbnails?
I personally think of what I want people to look at first and foremost, and I try and plan everything around that.
Okay.
Instead of trying to figure out like the style or being really attached to a certain pose or like something that's in the illustration, the actual object. I think it's easy to get attached to like, oh, I just really want to draw cats right now, so I'm gonna make sure this cat's really big, but then you kind of forget about all the elements around it, and then maybe you're compromising your composition. And also I think looking at a lot of like old master paintings and being able to study the values and how they use background and foreground and middle ground, and just like maybe taking a photo and looking at how that's composed also teaches you a bit about composition. And looking at things as lines and shapes instead of like a three-dimensional world also helps. But I find that the people who work in the entertainment industry, like animation and video games, all their kind of concept work is like pretty much revolves around being able to compose for a movie screen and to direct people to look in certain areas. So I think looking at those kind of process books made by maybe Pixar or any other animation studios also kind of teach a lot about how to point your eyes in different directions the methods they use.
Yeah, that's great. Nice tips. We'll write that down. I'll hand you over to the students. Does anyone here want to ask any questions to Ping? Is that all?
Do you know from your first sketch and your final work, right? Can I see in between what happens?
Sorry, it kind of broke up a little bit.
Yeah, no worries. Zatel was asking, is there anything you can show us that happens in between a first sketch and a final piece of work? But that would probably be like an unfinished painting, wouldn't it?
Like, I have sometimes scanned like the line drawing between the sketch and kind of the line drawing before I actually start painting, because I just bought a light pad that I use to kind of redraw the sketch onto the paper that I use to paint. But let me see. But it's not, I don't think it's much different. I just think it's like a cleaner sketch before I paint, if that makes any sense.
Yeah, sure.
Is that too light to see?
No, there's something coming through there, yeah. Okay, so it's just, you've just tidied it up so you've got a clear idea of the shapes. Okay, I see. It's almost like a blueprint. Yeah,
so everything has like a line kind of to contain it. It's almost like painting by numbers at this point, but just to make sure that I can remember exactly where the lines are, and also because I use the brushes without the masking, I kind of need to know where the edges are to be able to say like, okay, I'm gonna turn my brush this way when I paint, or I'm gonna, draw a thin line here because this is the edge or something.
Ping, it must be such an intense process of like decision making and planning ahead. Like for every brush stroke, having to. How do you not go crazy?
I guess I don't really think about how difficult it is, because I feel like this is my skill, so hopefully I can turn it into something where it is intuitive and being able to say, I know how to make this part of this shirt look the way that I want, using the mediums, just because I've used gouache for a few years, so I guess we get along. But also, like, that's the reason why I kind of have scraps of paper next to me, is just to be able to test it in case I have any doubts. So there's a lot of like pre-strokes before the actual stroke, just to make sure that it's the right texture or it's the right water consistency. And even if you do that stroke, you have to kind of be like, oh, I like the way that looks, but I'm going to have to remix my paint and do it again and do it fast enough before the paint dries. So it's kind of like this race, and it's a very fast medium to work with. But that's kind of what the drawing looks like. And once you paint over a pencil with gouache, you can't really erase it. So paints that are less opaque, you can still see through. So I actually try and like erase over parts that I know will be lighter, even after the sketch. So it's kind of like you draw it and then you erase 50% of it, and then you paint over it, and then you clean up things on the computer. So.
Wow. Beautiful. Thank you. Sophie has a question.
I wanted to know, like, roughly, do you know, like, from when you left school, like, what was the most, like, challenging thing, like, kind of progressing from being a student to being,
like a professional? Like, what was the bit that sort of challenged you the most? Like, did you find finding work quite difficult to get into the swing of when you first left art school?
Yeah, I think school and the real world are two very different places, and school is a great place to kind of make all your mistakes and to test out the things that you're unsure about. But I think the part for me that was the most shocking or difficult in a way was just trying to have like my communication with people when either I was working with them or I was trying to get work. Like, who am I as a person and what am I trying to achieve and what do I have to offer as an illustrator that's like new in the world and what hasn't already been done, like why am I here? So that's kind of like a huge, life question in general. But I think as far as being able to communicate with people that you're working with, like you don't want to disappoint them and you want to be, like you want to get along with someone that will hire you again, but at the same time you don't want to be a complete doormat and have them trample over you and have you do more work than you're being paid to do. So I think it's definitely an experience thing where you realize that there will be good art directors and bad art directors, but the more that you learn about yourself in the process, I think the more you can prevent yourself from maybe dealing with people that aren't really the best people to work with in the future. But the hardest part is to know when you're right and when you're wrong, I think. But that's kind of, for me, that's the reason why it helps to have other people around me who have kind of done what I'm doing for a bit longer so they can help me, like a mentor, or if I have questions, just like, I don't know pricing, or I don't know how to word this email, like what should I say, just have a second opinion sometimes. So, the people that you're sitting around with, you're all kind of in the same boat together, and I think down the line you guys will turn back to each other and be like, where are you in this world right now, and where am I, and how do we help each other in this? Because it's a very small community of people. So I hope that answers it a little bit.
Thank you.
Sure.
Ola, did you have a question?
I'd just like to know what kind of brush you use. I'm trying to imagine, I'm trying to guess.
I use watercolor brushes actually, because gouache and watercolor are not that different in material. But I have been using a brush the brand is called Escoda, and they make synthetic haired brushes and also kind of hybrid brushes between sable haired brushes and synthetic haired. So I use round brushes and flat brushes, and that's pretty much it. And nothing is bigger than, I don't know, a size 6 brush, or if that is a size that you can kind of think. But also I've recently bought a few more brushes that were all sable hair, which is the ones that are made from real animal fur. I'm sorry if you're into animals. But they actually do make really nice brushes. But it's hard to describe over Skype how they feel, but I like synthetic brushes because there's more resistance. It's a more rigid haired brush, so it helps with the dry brushing. And also being able to like maintain them and keep them clean to keep its shape also helps with the textures. But also like the sable haired brushes absorb water really well. So for parts where I need to cover more area in a flat color, like I can mix more color with water and it will stay in the brush for longer instead of having to like remix paint. Because that's the other thing with gouaches, once you kind of run out of a color that you've mixed, it's really difficult to remix the same exact color without having to kind of repaint a whole area. Mainly because it dries a little bit darker than when you see it on paper initially. So unless you're very good at mixing colors, I think, either you have to mix a lot and just use a brush that can hold the paint in for as long as possible. But I mean, anyone can email me and I can like take a photo of my brushes and like, show you exactly what they are.
Bless you, thank you.
Because it's so hard to describe these things. It's like, what does your hair look like? It's like, I don't know.
For sure. I think, we've got one more question, but before we ask you, I just want to say it's been really, really nice to see your work and to listen to you talk in such professional terms about the realities of your practice We've been studying your work amongst others this year, and it's nice to kind of meet you and kind of put the work to the face. It's been really a real pleasure. The thing that we've been asking everybody at the end of these conversations is, in your mind, what's the difference between just illustration and really great illustration?
That's a tough one. I guess I can only answer for myself, but I feel like when you can see that someone truly cares about what they're doing, it shows in their work. And if you don't enjoy what you're doing, or you feel like it's not something you feel is, your line of work, it also shows. So I guess that's probably the main difference. Like, you can see someone who can draw and who can do all the things, but don't have a passion for it. And then you see someone who loves what they do and are like striving to do better, and you just see kind of a bit of soul inside of their work. And I think that makes it great.
Yeah, wonderful. Okay, thank you.
Cool. Yeah, no problem.
Well, enjoy the rest of your day.
Thanks.
Open the window.
Sorry, should I just end the screen share? So.
Yeah, okay, let's do that. I'm going to do some fiddling here. Have a nice lunch.
Thank you. Have a good rest of day.
Yeah, we'll do. Should we say thank you to Ping?
Thank you.
It was my pleasure. Good luck.
Cheerio.
Bye.
Well, that was good, wasn't it? Eh?